Hola, hola. Welcome to El Grano con Nora, real talk on power and possibility without the fluff. I'm Nora Vargas, and for more than 30 years, I've been on the front lines navigating crisis and breaking barriers, from being an executive assistant to a community organizer to CEO to 12 years as an elected official. Yep, 12 years making decisions, carrying responsibilities, navigating it all without a playbook. So, this podcast is about real talk, real conversations about leadership, power, responsibility, and possibility. And I'm so excited that you're here. And, it's really a conversation of what it means to keep believing and redefining the American dream despite it all. I bring a really different lens to leadership because the reality is the world doesn't look the same for everyone. And it didn't definitely look like the same for me and for many of us Latinas, for us women of color, for us first generation professionals. For those of us who have spent our lives walking into rooms where we're often the only ones, and that's why I wanted to create this space. Not to pretend I have all the answers, but to share what I've already learned. Sometimes the lessons came through success, and sometimes they came through mistakes. And sometimes they come through a sailboat. And I know that's kind of weird to say. And I want you to know that I was actually planning to record something completely different on this episode today. I had my notes, my outline, and I knew exactly what I wanted to talk to you about. And then this weekend happened, and I couldn't stop thinking about it because sometimes life gives you the episode before you even know it. And so one of the things people have always said about me is that, Nora, you just go for it, you just do it, así tú te avientas. And that they're pretty right. I've spent most of my life saying yes and taking calculated risk, crossing the border, walking into rooms where I often was the only one and being the first. I blazed trails that often didn't come with a roadmap. I've run a lot of campaigns and I built organizations. I've led teams. I created things that didn't exist before. And, figuring things out as I went many times and somehow trusting that somehow I learned what I needed to learn along the way. And that's been my approach for most of my life. And I haven't done it alone, but I always have just done it, right? And honestly, I still believe in that in my heart and mi corazón. But this weekend, something shifted and it was so, so interesting to me. And I've been pondering a lot about it. And so I wanted to share. And it's not because I stopped believing in courage. And it's not because I stopped taking risk. But because for the first time in a long time, I found myself asking different questions. And the question really was, what am I actually afraid of? Or was I simply realizing how much preparation this whole thing I was doing really required? Because to me, those are two very different things. And understanding the difference may be one of the most important leadership lessons that I've learned in a long, long time. So the real talk is that a few weeks ago, well, actually, I decided, I think if you know me, you know that I want to learn things and I'm always learning new stuff. I'm a forever learner. Blah. And if you listen to my podcast, you know that. And so I'm one of those people who genuinely enjoys being a beginner. And I know it sounds weird, but I've always believed that learning keeps you humble and it keeps you curious. And it reminds us that there's always another skill to develop, another perspective to understand, another experience waiting for us. And so about a year ago, I started kayaking. I knew how to kayak when you went on vacation. Yo sé que soy mucho privilege, but you know what I mean? But I wanted to learn how to do it because I wanted to make it actually something that I did all the time. And so I love being in the water. I think there's something in it that really grounds me and it slows me down. And it reminds me that nature doesn't care about my calendar, doesn't care about my deadlines or my to-do list. The water simply just is. And so I've been going through kayaking, and I found out this year that Southwestern College, which is where I take my classes here in Chula Vista, California, that they were also offering sailing classes, and they haven't offered sailing classes, I think, since a little bit before COVID, or right about there. So here's the funny part. I think everybody knows I used to be a trustee at Southwestern College, and after all these years, I'm back on campus and not a trustee, not as a speaker, not as a public official, just a regular citizen as a student. And honestly, I really love it. Just that's a side note. And I think there's something really freeing about being the one asking questions instead of having to answer them. So anyway, being the beginner and learning from instructors who knew far more than I did, and I knew that I had to perform, that I didn't have to be the expert, that I just had to learn. And so there have been a couple of classes that we've taken. I decided to take the sailing class. And so there's been a couple of weeks that have gone by. But this particular Saturday, there wasn't that much wind. And if you know anything about sailing, this is something completely new to me, okay? And so they gave me the chance to what they call steer the boat, o sea, como manejarlo, right? Like just actually drive it. And so there's a captain and a skipper, and like, I was mostly the skipper. I'm not going to lie, because it was a trial run. And honestly, I think I did pretty good. Like, it's like you have to learn about the wind and all these other different things. And so it wasn't perfect, but it was good. And I was learning, I was listening, I was paying attention. And it's a lot of new language. And so I was getting a feel for the wind. And honestly, there wasn't much wind that day, like I said. And so the water was calm. Everything felt manageable. I was beginning to understand how the sailboat responded. Adjustments made a difference, how important it was to pay attention. And this is a team sport, unless you're going by yourself. But in this case, it was 3 of us. And so you got to be paying attention and all this other stuff. So it's really cool. So I remember leaving the first day on Saturday, and I was like, all right, I got this. I'm not an expert, not even close, but yo puedo, Nora the sailor. And so I was building confidence, the kind of confidence that comes from learning, not from knowing everything. And maybe that's where so many of us get stuck, right? Because we think confidence comes from before we begin, but maybe confidence really comes because we actually begin, because we just did it. So failed me el sábado. I was exhausted. I was exhausted on Saturday because rigging and all that stuff, it takes its toll. So Sunday came in the morning. I went kayaking for a little bit, and then I went sailing. And so Sunday was different because there was a lot of wind, right? And this is the day we rigged the sailboats. Rigged the sailboats quiere decir que, you actually put the sails on and all that other stuff. There's all this language that they use. And then we prepared to head out. Everybody's super excited. And each of us was going to take turns sailing. So there was going to be 3 people in each of the sailboats. And everything was going according to plan until it wasn't. And so it wasn't. It was one of those moments where we're preparing to head out. And as soon as we got on, I actually think it was my fault. But everybody was very sweet. And they said it wasn't. I think it was my fault. I think I did not balance well. And so the sailboat capsized. Así, paz, se cayó. And just like that, 1 second I was focused on the sail, the next second I was in the water, and I did lose my toe, and it was pretty bad. It's just, I don't know if it's a fracture, but anyway, all is good. And thankfully everyone was okay. The instructor was super calm, super sweet. She wasn't like, you're such a dummy, I've told you. And the young man who was also sailing with me, super nice. They were all very wonderful. So it was fine. And everybody laughed it out. And then we actually went out in the water. And it turned out the way we should have. But something happened inside of me that I wasn't expecting, not at that moment. And it came a little later, because here's the interesting. I never thought, I don't think of myself as a quitter, right? I don't quit, not once. As a matter of fact, I'm one of those people that I'll just keep going. But I realized that it was a really interesting situation for me, because I got right on the boat, and that wasn't the issue. I was sitting on the dock thinking, well, maybe, sailing isn't for me. But I got back on the boat. We kept learning and listening. We sailed. And then I wasn't thinking about quitting, but what I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened, right? And so the professor asked me if I wanted to go ahead and steer and just do it on my own. And I said, no, I think I want to learn more of this, the actual terminology and all that good stuff. So así lo dejé. Later that evening, I attended a strawberry moon cacao ceremony. If you haven't been to one, you gotta go. It is amazing. And it was here in town in La Jolla. And it was just one of those evenings where you get invited to slow down, to breathe, to reflect, to listen, and not to anyone else, but to yourself. And so as we sat there in silence, I realized I wasn't thinking about the ceremony. I was thinking about the damn boat. And I kept thinking and replaying the experience over and over again. I'm like, ¿qué hice? ¿Cómo me caí? ¿Por qué me dio miedo? What the hell is going on? Why am I so stressed? This is supposed to be a fun thing. Why am I feeling about this? And so I was really finding myself asking the question that surprised me. Was I actually afraid, or was it simply just realizing how much I still had to learn? And I think that's really humbling, right? Because those are two very different things. And I've never really thought about myself as someone who's easily scared. I've always taken calculated risks. I've run tough campaigns, started new jobs, built organizations. I walked into rooms where I was the only woman, the only Latina. At that time, many decades ago, the youngest person, sometimes the least experienced person, pero con muchas ganas. And I've always believed that if I prepare, if I work hard, and if I stay curious, I'm going to just figure it out. And that's always been my philosophy. So why was this experience sitting with me this way? And then it hit me. Maybe I wasn't experiencing fear. Maybe what I was experiencing was respect. Respect for the water, respect for the wind, respect for the actual skill, and respect for the fact that sailing isn't something you just master in a weekend. It's something you learn little by little, one lesson at a time. And honestly, there was something really humbling about that realization because, in leadership, we talk a lot about confidence. People say, be confident, project confidence, lead with confidence, but nobody really talks about where confidence comes from. I've always believed confidence comes from preparation, not perfection. Preparation, there's a difference. When I chaired board meetings, I was prepared. When I testified before legislative committees, I was always prepared. I asked a lot of questions. When I spoke to thousands of people, I was prepared. When I got all the feedback and all that, the briefings. When I led organizations through crisis, I was prepared. And preparation, although never guaranteed success, but it gave me something equally important. It gave me the confidence, not because I knew everything, right? No, it's not that arrogance, but because I trusted that I had done the work. I had done the homework. And so sitting there that evening, I realized the sailing experience was reminding me of something I already knew, but somehow I just forgot it. That confidence isn't pretending you know what you're doing. Confidence is trusting yourself enough to keep learning. And maybe that's where many of us get stuck. We think confidence is supposed to come first. We think we're supposed to feel ready before we begin. But what if that's backwards? What if confidence is built because we begin, because we practice, because we make mistakes, because we fail, we fall in my case, because we get back in the boat, right? And I started thinking about all the times in my life when the winds had changed, when things didn't go according to plan. Campaigns, leadership, public service, life, babies, all those things. You prepare and you think that you know what to expect. And then the wind changes. Life has a way of reminding us that we're never fully in control. Life has a way of reminding us that we're never fully in control. And the question isn't whether the winds will change, because they will. The question is, how will we respond when they do? Are we going to panic? Will we quit? Will we blame ourselves? Or will we pause, learn, adjust the sails, or keep moving? Because that's what sailing has taught me, right? You don't control the wind. You learn how to work with it. And maybe leadership is exactly the same. And maybe life too. And so for this No Manches segment, the truth is that we can talk about how quickly we expect ourselves to be good at something. Seriously. When did we decide that if we weren't immediately competent, we weren't supposed to do it? Think about it. We download an app, and if we don't understand it in 5 minutes, we're frustrated. We start a new job, and somehow we expect ourselves to perform like we've been there for 10 years. We take on a new leadership role, and we think we're supposed to have every answer on day one. And everybody around us usually does that too, expect that we have all the answers. So what I say is no manches. Who came up with that? And social media doesn't help. Everybody's posting the finished product. Nobody posts the practice. Nobody's posting the process. Well, most people are not. So, right? Everybody's posting how they crossed the finish line. And what we need is, the fact is that nobody's posting the hundreds of mornings they've wanted to stay in bed. Everybody posts the promotion. Nobody posts the self-doubt. Everybody posts the success. And very few people are posting about the learning or the mistakes or the bruised toe, in my case. Pero no manches, I think we've confused confidence with competence. We think confidence means never being nervous, never making mistakes, never feeling uncertain. But that's not confidence. That's perfectionism. And perfectionism is exhausting. Real confidence sounds more like this. I don't know how to do this yet. I haven't mastered this yet. I'm still learning. I'm still practicing. I'm still becoming. That's confidence, because confidence isn't pretending, right? Because and it's kind of like a double. What is it? Is double-edged sword porque te dicen, right? Be who you want to, like, act like who you want to be, no sé qué, algo así. But the truth is that confidence is really trusting yourself enough to say and to stay in the process. And here's one other thing I realized this weekend. Being the skipper wasn't about controlling everything, right? The skipper was the person who supports the captain and is part of a team and is just as important as the person that is the captain on the team. And so it reminded me how important it is, because so much in leadership gets framed around being in charge. Who's making the decision, having all the answers, being the one steering the ship. But sailing reminded me that even the captain doesn't control the wind. So think about that. You can prepare, you can study, you can pay attention, you can communicate well, you can trust your crew, you can make good choices, but you still don't control the wind. And leadership is a lot like that, right? We don't control every outcome. We don't control every circumstance. We don't control every person. We control only how we prepare. We control how we respond. We control how we learn. And we control whether we keep showing up. Now, I have to share that I am going to do my best to try to show up, because my toe may not allow me to show up to the sailing class, but oh, no manches. It really did teach me that that's what really leadership is all about, and why it's so humbling. Because once you think you've figured it all out, the wind changes and you have to learn all over again. So honestly, I think that's a gift, because it keeps us curious, it keeps us humble, and it reminds us that growth never really ends. You just have to be open to it. And maybe that's exactly how it's supposed to be. So, para el grano de oro, as we reflect, and what I want you to take away with you today is, I want to leave you with, when you get home, when I got home that evening, and I told her I was tired, I was replaying everything in my head, and I smiled, because even though that day hadn't gone the way I expected, I had learned something far more valuable than sailing. I had learned something about myself. I realized I haven't become more fearful. I haven't become more, like, thoughtful. I've actually become more thoughtful. I've become more intentional. I've become more aware that preparation matters. Not because I'm trying to eliminate uncertainty, but because I want to honor what I'm learning. And I think there's wisdom, and there's something about that is important. I think sometimes we put so much pressure on ourselves to be fearless, but maybe fear isn't the problem. Maybe pretending we're not afraid is. Because fear has something to teach us. Something is telling us to slow down. Something is reminding us to pay attention. Something is inviting us to prepare. And sometimes it's simply reminding us that we're doing something we've never done before. And that's not weakness, right? That's growth. If you're trying something new, like starting a business, changing careers, leading a team, running for office, becoming a parent, going back to school, or in my case, taking a sailing class, or simply just saying yes to something that stresses you a bit, I hope you take a minute to give yourself permission to be a beginner. Give yourself permission not to know everything. Give yourself permission to learn, because confidence doesn't arrive before the journey. Confidence is built during the journey. So one lesson, one mistake, one success, one capsize, one conversation, one day at a time. The winds will change. They always do. In leadership, in relationships, in business, in life, you can't control the wind, but you can learn how to adjust your sails. And maybe, I know it sounds cheesy, but maybe that's what resilience really looks like. not pretending that life is easy, and actually learning how to navigate it anyway. So here's my question for you this week. Where is your life? Where in your life have you been confusing fear with lack of ability, right? Maybe you don't need more confidence. Maybe you just need more practice. Maybe you don't need certainty. Maybe you just need to one more day on the water, one more conversation, one more opportunity to learn, one more chance to get back in the boat. Because I have a feeling you are all a lot more capable than you think. And so, with that, I want to thank you for being here. I thank you for listening. It makes me so happy. Also, I love the text messages. I love when you comment on LinkedIn and on Instagram and on TikTok and sharing your experience and what these podcasts bring for you. It makes me really happy, and I love to hear from you. So if today's conversation resonated with you, I hope you'll share with someone who's standing at the edge of something new. Share it with your friends and someone who's wondering whether they're ready, someone who's wanting to feel confident before they begin. Maybe this episode will remind them they don't have to wait, they just have to begin. And so, happy sailing. Leave a comment, send a message. I'd love to hear about a time the winds have changed you and what experience that taught you. This is El Grano, real talk on power and possibility without the fluff. This is the American dream despite it all. Until next time, take care of yourself, take care of each other and the winds. And when the winds change, don't forget, adjust your sails. Nos vemos pronto.